Police have laid 6 more charges against 49-year-old Elizabeth Wettlaufer. Just moments ago, Wettlaufer left court in Woodstock, Ontario, after facing these new charges. These charges include 4 counts of attempted murder and 2 counts of aggravated assault. The new charges stem from incidents that occurred between June 2007 and August 2016. Now, these are on top of the 8 counts of first-degree murder Wettlaufer was already facing in relation to the deaths of elderly patients in her care. Police say the investigation has been challenging, but they will continue to follow the evidence.
A very intense investigation, and obviously there's still a lot more questions than answers, but it's an ongoing investigation, and it's one that all the services are jointly looking at and working together.
Police would not speculate on what other measures they may take in the case, including exhuming bodies to gather more evidence. Let's go to Woodstock now. CTV's Daryl Newcomb is joining us with more. Daryl, you were in court this morning, a very dramatic half hour or so with the victims' families being able to look at Elizabeth Wettlaufer. What was that like? What was her demeanor and expression?
Well, you know, it was a very dramatic scene. In fact, the courtroom was silent when she was let in, except for the sound of her shackles and chained handcuffs as she was led to the front of the courtroom. The reaction from family, they remained silent, but the family and friends of her alleged victims, many of them staring at her for the entire 5 to 7 minutes of this hearing, never breaking their gaze. This, of course, was one of their first opportunities for many of them, it was their very first opportunity to actually lay eyes on her outside of what they've seen on television.
And again, describe for us how Elizabeth Wettlaufer appeared. What were you able to see in her eyes? What was her expression as all these family members are staring at her for the first time and trying most likely to figure out why?
It was interesting. At first, she scanned the courtroom gallery because it was simply so full of people. It was about 50% media, 50% family members of her alleged victims. And she kind of looked back and forth across the room a couple times. And then when she kind of caught the gaze of the family members staring at her, she looked straight forward and was essentially expressionless. She said nothing that was audible within the gallery during her hearing. And then when she was let out, she looked at the ground as she was led away by the police. So expressionless, but maybe a sense of curiosity and maybe surprised at the amount of attention that this has received from Woodstock and well beyond.
Daryl, what happens next in this case? When's her next court appearance? Has that been scheduled?
Yeah, the legal proceeding itself, they essentially attached these new charges that you spoke of earlier to the existing 8 counts of first-degree murder. The Crown added that there is going to be a significant amount of evidence discovery yet to go. So because of that, they just essentially have remanded her back into custody, and she'll be back appearing via video next time here in Woodstock on February 13th.
All right, CTV's Daryl Newcomb joining us this morning from Woodstock. Daryl, thank you for that. Now, the daughter of one of Wettlaufer's alleged victims had this reaction following the nurse's court appearance this morning.
I think she's sick, literally sick. She needs help.
Did you want to say anything to her at the time?
Yeah. But she's a sick person, and she's lost in this world. And she made a lot of families in pain for the rest of their lives.
So once again, 6 new charges have been laid against Elizabeth Wettlaufer, the Ontario nurse suspected of murder in long-term care facilities across the southwestern part of Ontario. CTV's legal analyst, Edward Prucci, is joining me now in studio. Edward, we saw Elizabeth Wettlaufer leaving just a short time ago. Do you want to recap for us what happened today in court?
So what we all thought was going to happen before perhaps a couple of days ago was a fairly simple and straightforward court appearance on the original 8 counts of first-degree murder. What ultimately happened was that court appearance, but it was combined with some real drama with the addition of 2 counts of aggravated assault and 4 counts of attempted murder. Very recently, we've obtained actually a copy of the information. That's the charging document. So the document that lists all of the charges. It's a new information that's been laid today that combines the original 8 as well as these 6 new charges. And in addition to some other interesting facts, it gives obviously the names of all of the alleged victims, as well as the date ranges in which each of these things happened. So there's a fair bit of specificity there. It's not able to give us precise dates, but you get ranges, and the ranges are different for each of the victims. So police seem to think that they've got a fairly decent handle on when these offenses occurred. Sometimes you see very broad ranges that span, months or years. That doesn't seem to be the case here. But perhaps the most interesting factor that comes out of that is on all of the new charges, so the 2 aggravated assaults and the 4 attempted murders, the mechanism of injury is alleged to be insulin injection. So that was something that we had heard some limited reports about before with respect to the murders, although it's not listed on the information on the murders. So the murder information does not tell us this is what caused the person's death. But the aggravated assault and the attempt murders all indicate it's insulin injection that was the mechanism by which an assault or an attempt murder happened.
And is it going to be a question asked as to how this nurse gained access to insulin, to that amount of insulin?
Well, so I think, a lot of questions will probably be answered. I mean, I happen to have a fair bit of knowledge about insulin only because my wife is a type 1 diabetic. So, we use it from a therapeutic perspective all the time. And if you are diabetic, insulin is required very, very regularly and in fairly large amounts, depending on how much a person is eating and the person's weight, person's health at the time. So it's a very easily accessible thing. And I mean, you can go into a pharmacy and with a modest prescription, get large amounts of insulin. And if you're a nurse, certainly at a hospital or at a home care facility, I would think that insulin is a very, very common drug that probably isn't all that restricted. It's not like when at hospitals you're talking about opioids, right? So if you're treating somebody for pain medication, those are very closely regulated. A nurse or a doctor has to sign a drug like that in or out. The dosages are very carefully maintained and monitored. I don't know if that's the case with insulin because it's just so commonly utilized for a very simple therapeutic reason. And maybe that's exactly the kind of thing that makes it rife for abuse.
The investigation is still ongoing. Woodstock police asking for the public's help in this, which indicates this is going to be a long and lengthy process. How difficult I don't want to say difficult, how heady is this task for her defense team?
Well, I mean, look, cases of this kind of severity are always very, very challenging. Add in the media dimension and the spotlight that you're always working under, and knowing all these victims' families are going to be, as we've heard from some of the victims already, they say, I'm going to be there each and every day.
Highly emotional.
So it just magnifies the challenge, multiple times. So the defense at this stage is certainly at a very early part of the process. They want to gather all the information. They don't want to make any conclusions. They probably have some thoughts about what direction this might go in, but I think they want to just read. It's just hunker down and read.
All right, Ed Prucci, thanks so much.
You're welcome.
Really appreciate your analysis and you being part of our coverage.